Hi there, I'm Nandini or Alif, and today I just want to talk a little bit about something that sort of came out as a flow. I have been on a emotional healing journey for only a few months, and sometimes when I get inspired by what I'm using to heal myself, I sort of start writing things down that first sort of comes out as just, a few notes to take as I reaffirm these ideas in my mind, and then it just becomes a flow that comes naturally, following my logic. So I really wanted to share that with you because this channel is called Figuring It Out Alive, and this is probably the best I've ever felt in my life. And I feel like I'm just sort of going from strength to strength. So I would love to share that. I've got my notes. I've kind of got a script, I guess. It's in this direction. So if you see me looking in this direction, that's why. Okay, let's begin. Now you must have heard that wherever attention goes, that's where energy flows. And manifestors and scientists alike believe that that is what creates reality. And the thing that I kind of found a little tricky to make myself realize and accept is that whether I have a fear, that feeling is also being it's influencing my reality. And if I have a certain hope and a desire and a wishful want, that is also affecting my external world and my internal world, So let's start by talking about our feelings. Oops. Is it a little too deep for a first date? So our feelings can really dictate how we perceive a situation and also how we respond to things, right? I am sure that you are very aware of this. Like, if you're in a great mood, if something bad happens, you can just sort of brush it off. Whereas if you feel like you woke up on the wrong side of the bed and one thing goes wrong, then you're just like, this day's doomed, everything's gonna go wrong today. And sometimes it does happen that way. Why is that? Our heart and mind, these two must correspond. So if our heart has a feeling, I'm just using the word heart, obviously we know it's all hormones and chemicals, right? When our heart feels a feeling, let's take anxiety or fear. Our mind is really, really good at supporting that. It will conjure up all these images and memories and fears and fatalistic sort of views and all these ideas that support that feeling of fear and anxiety within us. And all these ideas, images, thoughts, and memories are kind of fueling that feeling inside, right? And as I had mentioned, once you feel like you're having a bad day at the beginning of the day and, consequently a lot of things just seem to go wrong in your life, that's also because we sort of have that sort of outlook and outcome. Not outcome, but outlook of this expectation of the day just going to shit. And I think that's because we sort of create this attitude. We have an outlook which is just negative, and then our mind perceives every small little inconvenience as further, proof of our mind's belief and our feeling, because that feeling just, it turns into a belief that this day is going to just go wrong. I know I'm not alone in this. I know that a lot of people I've talked to, my friends, often talk about this, like, I had such a bad day today. I woke up, that's usually how it starts. I woke up, and sometimes people say, I woke up feeling great, but then I got a phone call from blah blah blah, and then the rest of the day just turned to. So I think to sort of counter this, there are two aspects we've got to focus on, and first is believing in your power within yourself to change this, okay? We all are individually so powerful, and we've got to learn to believe that and find evidence for that in our own lives, how we have influenced and affected others. That shows that we have great pull, we have great magnetism, and we just have innately so much power. And the other aspect is the power of our attention and our focus, and how that can really shape and create the reality that we perceive, right? There's an external reality, of course, but what is much more powerful to us is what we believe within us. That is how we kind of narrate, what's going on in the world to ourselves. The stories that we're telling ourselves really influences how we see the world, which in turn tells us what we believe about the world. And once that turns into a belief, it becomes a system, right? Every belief that we have is sort of a brain formula or algorithm. Hold on. Every belief we have is a formula or an algorithm. And it's sort of a simple example is a stereotype. If I've met a person who's from a particular state or a country, and they had a very strong impression on me, the next time I meet someone else who's from the same state or the same country, my mind is automatically going to be trying to figure out, wait, is this just something that's common between them and that first person? Is this something that all the people from that country or from that state share? The mind is used to that, and it's because it's a survival mechanism, right? Our minds, okay, I'm gonna say it, what we draw attention to and what we store in our memories, that's kind of finite. And there are very, very few people who can remember absolutely every single thing. So we kind of create these systems, obviously, to help us survive in the world. Obviously, from a young age, when we see a person with an angry expression, most of us learn not to approach that person or be scared of that person. That's a very simple way of me explaining how that's survival, So the next time you see a person with an angry expression on their face, know or believe that you know better than to approach that person, because that person may not give you their time. And they might just be a stranger who's looking at an app or thinking about something that's made them feel, a bit angry or upset. But perhaps if you approach them, their expression might change completely, right? We don't know that, but we believe in what we see based on the beliefs that we have. I hope you're following me. What I'm trying to explain here, I believe, I am sure that you would agree with me. I know that you'd agree. I just hope I'm doing a good job explaining this. Okay, so all of that explanation was ad-lib. It just sort of came out of me. And now I'm actually going to go back to my notes and try to follow the threads here. Okay, so I've written, when the heart and mind, when these two things correspond, that furthers our belief in the things that we believe, right? In the ideas that we have, which turn into beliefs. And this definitely affects your energy. It affects how you come across in the world and how you respond to absolutely everything, because of the beliefs that you're holding, because of the energy you're carrying. And usually this means that you're just going to further perpetuate those narratives by exuding that energy, which kind of created that reality in the first place. Let's say that, once again, taking the example of approaching a person with an angry face. Let's say at a very young age, that person was our primary caregiver, like our mother or our father, and a few times in early naive childhood, we approached them while they were not in a good mood, or they were slightly upset, and our approaching just made them even angrier, and perhaps that led to us feeling unhappy, perhaps violence, you know? So that got cemented in the brain as, oops, that was not a good experience. And perhaps it happened a few more times. And then we sort of approach that person with caution when they had a certain expression or when they had a certain energy that we could perceive or intuitively perceive that they had, you know, if they're sitting in a certain position. Not just the materialistic things, but sometimes we energetically can definitely feel how a person is feeling when we're so connected to them, right? So what we learn to do is, for a lot of people, we learned just to sort of back off. But that doesn't necessarily, as I said, apply to absolutely everyone in our life, in our surroundings. The way our parents responded to us is probably not going to be the way maybe our teacher will respond to us, or our colleague will respond to us, or a stranger in a market will respond to us. If we see them sitting in the same position with the same sort of expressions that we, you know, saw our parents having. So that's an expectation, and that affects your energy. And what that will do is make you not approach them because you fear. And so you're just furthering your reality of, you know, when that happens, you're not going to be supported, you're not going to be loved, you're not going to be cared for, and, you know, paid attention to, because people have their own problems. It might even get violent. You might be hurt. So each one of these beliefs is so potent because it affects us energetically. And then the way that we carry ourselves in the world is just like a repeated cycle. It's just perpetuating what we believe. And why is that? Because we chose to put our attention to what we saw. And then that generated a feeling, which then made us feel like, oh man. But can we think differently? Okay, now I'm gonna move on to a slightly different, you know, just jut off at an angle here and talk about things that we resist, especially within ourselves. You know, I would say that I suffered from CPTSD, which is childhood post-traumatic stress disorder. I have had a lot of very traumatic experiences which triggered a lot of things within me. So for a very long time, I lived my life in a constant state of escapism. Like, I used to daydream so much as a child, as a teenager. I could just spend days and days in a world in my mind because the external reality was so difficult for me to bear. But it wasn't necessarily, once again, the external reality. It was my inner world. My truths were so heavy. They were so painful, as well as what was happening outside, I have to say. It was both. But once I got out of that situation, I still ran away from whatever I was holding, not whatever, all that I was holding inside me. Until a few months ago, I had no idea that I could do this. I had no idea that what I had to do was flip the narrative. When we run away from things, we are resisting them. And you can imagine sort of like, some sort of elasticated trampoline-like material. The more you push something, it's gonna bounce back. It's gonna affect you. You must have heard of this. Whatever you resist persists. Whatever you're resisting and pushing back and pushing away from you so forcefully, it will persist. So how do you change that? You flip the narrative. Let me explain what that means. Okay, now I've got a double page spread here. Remove this. Okay, so at this point in my notes, honestly, I didn't even elaborate so much when I wrote all those notes, but I feel like I had to explain it, probably to myself. I'm probably going to watch this video back if I ever slip back into just being very far from this process, which I hope I don't. But I'm like so in love with doing this work because of the results, man. The results. I live lightly. Like, I feel like life is easy now. I've never ever felt life was easy. I always had like fear. And I must admit, like, there are times when I still do, but that fear is so much easier to manage because of flipping the narrative. So let me get to that now. And I'm actually just gonna read my notes and try not to elaborate. Let's see if that works. I'm not sure it will, but I'll try. You know what? That's a belief of mine. And I'm gonna see if I can flip the narrative here and limit my sort of natural stories and analogies and stuff and just stick to the script. If the script actually is as good as it felt when it was coming out of me, because I haven't even looked back at it. I just felt like, you know what, this is a moment and I feel like making this video, so let me just do it right now, because there are so many ideas for videos I have. There's a backlog of recorded audio and it's just not being put out there, and I really, really, really want to put more things out there. So here we are. So talking about resistance and keeping ourselves as far away from the things that make us feel uncomfortable inside us. When the past brings us memories which are so uncomfortable that we run from them, distract ourselves, or just label it and shut the door, we are resisting it. We're resisting those feelings, those memories. We are keeping ourselves from working on those beliefs. And all of these things we avoid, they have a counter force. We're doing it from a place of trauma. And when we realize this, when you realize that the reason why you're avoiding it is because of the trauma, you have to believe in your power to change it, to flip the script. So use your creativity. Okay, use it. And if you can't get ideas, I'm here to help you. This is gonna be wild, and a lot of people are not willing to even consider this. And I understand that, because 2 years ago, I was in exactly the same place. I'm gonna ask you a question, and that is, how was that traumatic event, or that traumatic period, person, whatever it was, how was that actually good for me? It sounds wild, but please just stick with me. Please just stick with me. Please just stick with me here. This is gonna be beautiful, I promise you. When you start to brainstorm and really think about how those things that hurt you so deeply have actually helped you, how they might have made you a good person, a better person, a deeply feeling person, a good friend, whatever it is, try to write them down. Try to think about even the smallest of small things. If it's something like, I don't really want to come up with examples, but if you're feeling really, really stuck, it could be something that you just conjure up with your imagination. You know the way that anxiety makes us think of the wildest things in a negative way? Try to flip it around and see if this question, how did that traumatic event actually help me? Or how was that good for me? Okay, really, how was it good for me? Try to think of the wildest thing. For example, I spent a lot of my summers just at home, never going out. And that's because I had so many fears, plus I was really, really sheltered. Hey, I could say, hey, well, maybe I have a less chance at getting skin cancer because I didn't have a lot of UV exposure, right? So if it starts off in that direction, let it start off there. And then get to something that really, really you can relate to and resonate with deeply. And as you do this process, a lot of buts may come in. And at first, while you're in this process, allow those buts. To give you an example of what I mean, you know what the ridiculous thing, the so-called ridiculous thing I said about being really sheltered and staying at home all summer and never going out. And I'm like, well, I guess I wasn't exposed to UV, so I didn't have as much sun damage, right? My brain would just go, but that made you really unhealthy. You barely ever moved your body. You never had social connections. you know, during the summer. You were so isolated. You were so emotionally damaged, blah, 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 blah. All these buts will come up, and those buts are the most painful truths, right? And the things that I just said right now, they're not even the most painful. I mean, I could say, but you were so unhappy, and you had nothing that you did. And sometimes they would even be like, but you still didn't do anything even though you had books. Like, you know, like the voice might even be trying to guilt you. So what I'm saying here is allow that voice to take up the space it needs to. Give it the space, give it attention, listen to that voice that's saying but, when you're trying to think of something positive that came out of this traumatic event. And treat yourself with affection. Even treat this critical voice, this hurt and pained and wounded voice with affection. Listen to yourself as it all pours out, and I would strongly recommend, like I do in pretty much every video I make, write things down, journal it, even if it's just a splatter of words. Put those words down. Whatever you're feeling, whatever you're thinking, whatever narrative is coming into your mind, write it down. It is so powerful to write these things down, because then you can turn back at them and you can see how far you've come. So listen to that voice, but don't go back there. Don't get stuck in to those negative narratives. Don't resist the fact that you're trying to change. And don't be pulled back into that very, very, very negative space. Instead, just let it pour out. Follow those threads of grief, those knots you clench and hold on to in the pit of your stomach, inside your chest, those knots that don't let you breathe, that don't let you think, that don't let you sit with yourself in silence. And if it gets really, really overwhelming, notice yourself breathe when it's getting too much. And if it's too painful and you're like sobbing and crying, it's just too much for your mind to handle. Notice that as your heart is sort of pumping that blood up to your face and to your head, and you can feel your head throbbing and as though a headache might come on. Try to stabilize your breathing. And that is the hardest thing when you're sobbing and crying. But try to breathe in deep, as deeply as you can, as steadily as you can, and try to stabilize your breath. Another method is to try to ground yourself as much as you can in the current present moment, to realize that you are safe and you are not back there. And you're not even that person anymore. Every person changes. We all change moment to moment. With every YouTube video exposure, with every day that we live, with every meal that we eat, we change within us, biologically, physically, psychologically, emotionally, energetically, we change. So try to stabilize your breathing and then ground yourself in this moment. And how you do that is you can count 5 things with each sense. Let's start with sight. Count 5 things you can see in the room. Then we can move on to touch. What are 5 sensations you feel right now? For example, I can feel the heaviness of this ring on my finger. I just became aware of my hair clip, which has, clenched my hair, and it also feels a bit heavy actually. And then, so just like that, count 5 things that you feel in your body. Can you become aware of the watch on your wrist, of the feeling of the cloth against your skin? So first sight, then touch, then sound. And sound is pretty awesome. Just sit for 30 seconds and count 5 different sounds you can hear. I can hear, like in this moment, I can hear the slight whirring of my laptop. I can hear somebody else's AC, maybe a neighbor's. I can hear the clock, a very loud sound in my room. And then sometimes I can hear myself breathe, just count these things. And then you can also move to smells and taste, if that applies, but those are so subtle sometimes and so consistent that you may not, but it's often very interesting to notice that you do have a flavor on your tongue. And then also feel the texture of your tongue as you're thinking about that. So these This is a very, very simple technique to ground yourself as you're feeling overwhelmed, because when you try to take something that's painful, don't start with the most painful, okay? Just start with something that perhaps triggered you today, right? Something you avoided today. How were you feeling? I didn't want to feel it. I immediately reached for, something really, really pleasant to eat and a show to distract myself. Pause. Put those things aside. Maybe keep the ice cream, keep the thing that you want to eat. And really sit down with your journal and think about, how am I feeling right now? How am I feeling right now? Why is that? It might trigger a memory. If you go back far enough. When was the last time I felt this way? What other memories come to mind when I think about this feeling? Right, these are very simple questions that can help guide you to find one of the root memories or the root causes. And that may be filled with so much grief, pain, guilt, all of these incredibly negative, depressing feelings. So that's where the work starts, because then you take those experiences and you try to change them, and you think about, what good came out of that? How did that affect me in a good way? How did that benefit me? And as you start writing those things down, your mind will resist because it's so pained. Not always, and if it doesn't, fantastic. It gets easier with each time you do this, with each trigger that comes up. So as I said, start with the smaller triggers. Don't go straight into the deepest, dark, most painful, most triggering memories. Don't go there. Start small. Let's come back to it. Let's get back to the script now. Once you're grounded, take a little break if you absolutely need to, but make sure you come back to it. You have to let out that grief and give it that little space and attention, and always pull yourself back to the present moment and realize that you are safe. You are safe right now, and you're away from that memory. You're away from that memory, and you have the power to change your life. You have the power to change how you view that memory, because the way that you view it is not serving you. It's not helping you to think of only the negative that has happened in your life. Keep reinforcing the new narratives that you create, the positive narratives that you create about the past. This made me think of the quote, I don't know who it's by, but they say that history is written by the victors. Now, if you are alive and if you are breathing, if you are capable of watching this video on YouTube, you won over all the shit that you have been through so far in your life. You won over all the shit that you put yourself through in your life. So be really aware of how you're telling these stories to yourself, and to others, of course, as well, but especially to yourself. How do you really narrate these stories honestly? How do you feel about your past? Do you see yourself as a victim of the past? Maybe yes. And can you now see how you have survived it all? Which means that you already are a victor, not a victim. And that you're still on your hero's journey. Your story isn't done yet. My story isn't done yet. We can do it. We can flip this narrative. And we have to do so without lying about anything, and especially not to ourselves or to anyone. Hold the truth that is so painful. Hold it. You know it's true. You keep it there. That is the truth. But now ditch that old sorrowful lens narrating that heartbreaking, guilt-ridden, shameful, sorrowful story. Now see yourself as the victor. Begin right now and write a new line each day of the story of your victory. I'm not asking for a chapter. Just one line each day of your winner's journey. And if a line is too much, just start with one word. What is one beautiful, awesome word you can share with yourself and the world about yourself? Mine is friend. I am an awesome friend. I know that. And through this video, I am here for you. Tell me your word. What is that word which is so filled with love for yourself? That word that you own. You own this word, so share it in the comments, and I will see you in my next video. My name is Nandini. I also go by Alif, but at this point, I don't even care. I really don't care about aliases. I hope you found this slightly helpful. I know it's immensely long. Thank you very, very much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye.